rapid sociological and technological change when it comes to child pornography. Among other things, it will be made clear in the law that this applies to social networks and apps.
To everyone in this country, especially with the rise of the internet and online social media networks, I encourage all members to support this groundbreaking legislation, Bill C-63. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, as there isn't enough time for questions and comments, when we do return back, the honourable member will have 5 minutes of questions and comments. Statements by members. Déclaration des députés. The honourable member for Bonavista, Buren, Trinity.
Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Dental Care Plan is already changing lives in many communities in Bonavista, Buren, Trinity, and across Newfoundland and Labrador. Almost 42,000 Newfoundlanders and Labradorians can now visit the dental office thanks to the Canadian Dental Care Plan. Mr. Speaker, dental care is health care, and we know Canadians, including the 750,000 who have already received care, don't want their uninsured neighbours or family members to end up in ER from infections for the simple fact that they just couldn't afford to go to the dentist. As members of Parliament, we must show up for our communities and put the interests of Canadians first. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Niagara Falls.
Speaker, across our country, millions of Canadians selflessly invest their time and energy to help make our communities great. One such individual is Stephanie Bjorgen, who has worked tirelessly to improve the quality of life for children and their parents through the establishment of the Red Roof Retreat. Red Roof Retreat was established in 2000, but the journey to its creation began in 1993 when Stephanie's middle son, Garrett, was born with cerebral palsy. That's when Stephanie started realizing just how little there was available for Garrett and other children with special needs. So she got to work and has been tremendously devoted ever since to starting and growing this incredible organization. In July, Stephanie was awarded the Meritorious Service Decoration in the Civil Division by the Governor General. It is my sincere honor to recognize Red Roof Retreat and Stephanie Bjorgen in the House of Commons today and to thank her for making our community and our country a better place to live.
The honourable member for Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, over 8,000 Prince Edward Islanders have already received dental care thanks to the Canadian Dental Care Plan and the dental professionals in PEI who work closely with our indefatigable Minister of Health to improve the program. I wish to recognize the leadership of the Dental Association of Prince Edward Island, including Dr. Mike Conley and Dr. Matt Schaffner, who always put their patients first during discussions with our government. I'm honoured to represent 2,000 of those patients, many of whom are seniors on fixed incomes. But what does the leader of the official opposition have to say to them? He claims the program doesn't exist. He didn't protect your CPP pension, and he won't fight for your dental care. Seniors have worked hard their whole lives. They deserve the dignity of knowing that their pension is safe and they can receive the dental care they need. Our government is delivering exactly that for them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, media outlets are so important in local communities everywhere in Quebec. In Longueuil, FM 103.3, the South Shore's community radio station, was recently honoured as a Community Radio of the Year at the Rencontre de la Disque ceremony. This honour recognises the station's commitment to promoting Francophone music and emerging talent. By giving a voice to local artists and bringing culture closer to the listeners, FM 103.3 is strengthening the region's cultural identity. For its part, TVRS, which is celebrating its 35th anniversary this year, continues to serve the community with programming that is as rich as it is diverse. By highlighting local events and stories, TVRS reflects the day-to-day reality of its viewers, providing local content that is essential to the community's well-being. These two media outlets exemplify the importance of a strong local press, one that forges ties and brings everyone in our communities closer together. Thank you. Thank you so much for building solidarity and unity. We will continue to fight alongside you. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Canso.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to rise in the House today to talk about the Canadian Dental Care Plan, and it's helped over 7,000 constituents in my riding of Cape Breton-Canso. Now, the Conservative leader says the program doesn't even exist, but tell that to more than 750,000 Canadians and close to 69,000 Nova Scotians that have already received dental care. Now, our government knows that investing in dental care means better outcomes, health outcomes for Nova Scotians and Canadians. The Conservatives don't even know how to run public health care plans. They only know how to cut them. The Conservative leader had dental coverage for the last 20 years or so. Is it too much to ask for Nova Scotians to have the same?
The honourable member for North Okanagan, Shuswap.
Mr. Speaker, over the summer I met with and heard from the good people of the Okanagan, Shuswap, and across BC. They are hardworking and they love their country. But what I heard from them was taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and they are saying time is up. 1 in 5 Canadians skipped or reduced the size of at least one meal because they couldn't afford groceries. 1 in 5 parents ate less so their children or other families could eat. In Vernon, 1 in 23 families relied on the food bank in the last 12 months, and 1 in 13 kids depended on the food bank last year. 30% of food bank users in Vernon are children. Many food bank users are hardworking middle-class families struggling to put food on the table, some already working 2 or more jobs. What I heard was after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, those good people have no confidence in this government and want a carbon tax election now.
The Honourable Member for Vimy. Mr. Speaker, thanks to our government, the Canadian Dental Care Plan helps Canadians across the country, including in Quebec. Over 713,000 Quebecers are eligible for coverage through the Canadian Dental Care Plan, including 12,000 people in my riding of Vimy. And if that's not enough to convince you of the program's success, well, just ask the 750,000 Canadians who have already benefited from the plan. These are real people who are benefiting from this historic program put in place by our government. When we make healthy communities a priority, everyone benefits.
Merci.
The Honourable Member for Madawaska-Restigouche. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my riding of Madawaska-Restigouche, we're seeing the positive effects of the Canadian Dental Care Plan. Over 52,000 New Brunswickers are eligible for care under this program. That's not only great news for my province, Mr. Speaker, but it's also great news for the 750,000 Canadians who have already had access to care through the plan. Mr. Speaker, Conservative cuts will endanger the dental care program, and our people need it in New Brunswick and elsewhere in Canada. Canadians can rest assured that our government is committed to protecting their healthcare system and their dental care. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
The third Saturday in September is National Hunting, Trapping and Fishing Heritage Day across Canada, but this NDP Liberal government has turned their back on hunters and anglers. Hunting, trapping and fishing are synonymous with Canadian identity and heritage. Canada is blessed to have vast amounts of public land, forest, rivers, lakes and oceans. And as the Shadow Minister for Hunting, Angling and Conservation, I am proud to represent the interests of the millions of Canadians who hunt, fish and conserve our wild spaces. But after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, hunters and anglers have had enough. As lawful gun owners, hunters are tired of being demonized and blamed by this government for the violent crime wave they caused. Anglers are frustrated by the restrictions and closures that make no sense, and grassroots and local conservation organizations are ignored or left out in the cold in favor of global agendas that will deny Canadians access to our own wild spaces. Conservatives know that hunters and anglers are the original and best conservationists, and a Conservative government will always listen, respect, and include them.
L'honorable député de London.
The Honourable Member for London West.
Mr. Speaker, before our government passed the Canadian Dental Care Plan, 1 out of 4 Canadians could not afford to go to the dental office. Now, since we passed the Canadian Dental Care Plan, more than 700,000 Ontarians can now visit a dental provider. This has allowed dentists in my community to serve over 10,000 people in London West, Mr. Speaker. We clearly know that this is working because 750,000 Canadians have already used a CDCP, and they don't want to lose that access to this vital program. Conservatives do not want to talk about the incredible impact of this program that it has had on many thousands of lives in our country, because they don't want to know that they're going to be cutting, Mr. Speaker. They're going to be cutting this program, which will impact Canadians. Our government, however, is always going to put Canadians first. We're going to work to get this country's healthcare, the healthcare that it deserves. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Caribou, Prince George.
Since 2016, over 47,000 Canadians have lost their lives due to overdose. Overdose is the leading cause of death for children aged 10 to 18 in my province of British Columbia. The Tribal Council, representing 14 First Nations on Vancouver Island, has declared a state of emergency over the ongoing opioid and overdose crisis. Under this NDP Liberal government in Ottawa and the NDP government in BC, Indigenous people in BC are dying at a rate 6 times higher than that of non-Indigenous. This Prime Minister and his friend Premier Eby have unleashed crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder on our streets. Their radical experiments like so-called safe supply and decriminalization have turned our once safe communities into war zones. Only common sense Conservatives will end the dangerous drug experiments and bring home treatment, prevention, and recovery for our loved ones. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up for this Prime Minister.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, voting for the best interests of Quebec means voting with us on the Conservative Party's motion of non-confidence in this government. If the Bloc Québécois truly cares about the people of Quebec, then it must vote with the Conservative Party and stop selling its soul. That's what Premier Legault has urged them to do. So far, the Bloc Québécois has failed to achieve a single thing for Quebec. On the issue of the woodland caribou, the Liberals are going to put 8,000 jobs at risk with their Liberal decree. The Bloc has not managed to negotiate to have the decree cancelled. The only party working to save the forestry sector in Quebec is the Conservative Party. That's why the Bloc must vote with us on the non-confidence motion in order to save 8,000 forestry jobs all over Quebec. Mr. Speaker, we need to really, truly support Quebec. Will the Bloc vote to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime?
The honourable member from Winnipeg South.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Manitobans believe in building up, not tearing down our public health care system, as the Conservatives have always done over the decades. That's why we are taking action to strengthen it for the long term. Our government is making significant progress in dental care, with more than 62,000 Manitobans now eligible to receive care. Across the country, 750,000 Canadians have already accessed dental care that they need, relieving families of the burden of high out-of-pocket expenses. This program is already making a real difference in the lives of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we've heard loud and clear from Manitobans that they want to see meaningful investments in health care, and we are doing exactly that. This is about creating a stronger, more inclusive health care system that reflects the values of Manitobans, equity, accessibility, and a commitment to leaving no one behind. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, there were tears of joy and relief across northern BC last night when news broke that 6-year-old Oakland Schweder had been found safe. Oakland was reported missing Thursday evening, and what occurred over the next 72 hours was one of the largest searches in northern BC history. On Saturday alone, over 800 people were out searching for her. I hope my colleagues will join me on behalf of all Canadians in thanking the RCMP, search and rescue teams from across BC, the Canadian Rangers, Skintyee First Nation, Chinook Emergency Response, the BC Wildfire Service, and especially the hundreds of everyday citizens who traveled from far and wide to be part of the search effort. And Mr. Speaker, as we rejoice that young Oakland is back in her parents' arms, this morning, our hearts and condolences go out to the family in Shamattawa, Manitoba, who have received tragic news concerning their missing loved one. May they find strength and support in the days to come. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. I would like to highlight the absolutely exceptional work of Carol Binet, who has been working as a shoemaker in Trois-Rivières since 1957. Mr. Binet is still working. He's 83 years old, and he demonstrates a remarkable mastery of his trade. Carol's passion for shoemaking dates back to his school days. Over time, his workshop has become a true institution, serving customers from all over the Mauricie region. He's also developed a sewing and upholstery department, as well as a shoe shop. The people of Trois-Rivières know that they are very fortunate to have Mr. Binet, who is truly very skilled and has great people skills, so every visit to his shop is a precious and unique experience for the people of the riding. And I asked him, why don't you retire? And he said, well, if I were to retire, there wouldn't be any shoemakers left. He is so very dedicated. It's an honor to commend him on his incredible career. He is a true example of resilience and perseverance. Thank you for being there for the people of Trois-Rivières.
The Honourable Member from Portage-Lisgar.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Now the Bloc have officially decided to join the coalition so they too can cause a little bit of hardship for Canadians. They clearly support skyrocketing rents and crime and chaos in our communities and weakened wages. Just the other day, the Premier of Quebec called on the Bloc to vote in favour of our non-confidence motion to end this tired government, and I agree with him. But the question is, why don't the Bloc? Do they not shop at the same stores as the rest of us where the carbon tax has driven up the price of everything? Can they not see the drug-fueled crime in our streets? Or maybe it's because they have the most MPs slated to benefit by getting a pension, just like the leader of the NDP. One thing is clear. The choice Canadians will have in the carbon tax election. The Liberal NDP Bloc coalition, who will continue to increase grocery prices, raise your rents, spend recklessly, and allow crime to run rampant. Or common sense Conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
The Honourable Member from Calgary-Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, over 105,000 Albertans are now eligible for the Canadian Dental Care Plan, and 750,000 Canadians have already received care. The numbers speak for itself. Canadians want the CDCP. Accessing dental care shouldn't be political. This is a historic program, and we must protect and build our public health care system so that it's well equipped to meet the needs of Canadians today and for generations to come.
Colleagues, chers collègues, the last time I was in this chair, there were a number of questions which were not relevant to the administration of government. There were words which fall outside of what's acceptable in a parliamentary parliamentary system, and there was behaviour which was also outside of the parliamentary traditions. I'm hoping I will have more to say about this in the coming days, but I hope that members will conduct themselves in a manner that is befitting of our constituents who have sent us here to represent them. Alors, chers collègues, jeudi.
Dear colleagues, last Thursday there were questions that were not germane to government operations and administration. We heard certain statements that are unbecoming of Parliament, and we saw certain gestures in the same direction. And so I hope that today we will be better. We will behave better in a dignified way and in respect of our constituents who have voted us in. I will have more to say on the matter in the days to come.
The
Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
From Regina Capel.
After 9 years of NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up. And Canadians are suffering. And the Liberals look around the country and they see tent cities popping up in our communities. They see millions lining up at food banks and families falling further and further into debt. And what do they think is the cause of all these problems? That Canadians aren't paying enough in taxes. That must be why they've already hiked the carbon tax 5 times and why they're going to hike it to 61 cents a litre. How can making everything more expensive provide any relief for Canadians?
Exactly.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am glad that the Conservatives are finally talking about the economy because it gives me a chance to highlight some good economic news we've had. Last week, we learned that inflation in August was at 2%. In fact, for all of this year, inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range. That means interest rates are coming down. Meanwhile, wages have been outpacing inflation for 19 months in a row. But the Conservatives don't like to talk about that because good news for Canadians is bad news.
Exactly.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
She can tell all the people lining up at food banks that they've never had it so good, and she knows that prices are not coming down. She also knows that her carbon tax won't stop a single forest fire or flood. They've admitted that. So Canadians get the brutal double whammy of all the extra costs associated with natural disasters, plus the carbon tax on top of it. And now the NDP leader is trying to pull off another stunt. He's trying to fool Canadians that he's got some new position on the carbon tax. In reality, he loves it. He's voted for it 24 times. If they're so sure that Canadians love their carbon tax, why don't they take it to the Canadian people and let them decide in a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, all these Conservatives know how to do is talk Canada down. And you know why that is? It's because they don't want Canadians to ask themselves what the Conservatives really stand for. That's because the Conservatives have a hidden agenda. Yes. They have a hidden austerity agenda. And it is time for us all to ask ourselves, what would they cut? Would they cut childcare? I think so. Would they cut dental care? I think so. Would they cut our housing plan? There she would.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
It's Canadians who are cutting back as they've seen their paychecks devalued and prices skyrocket. But it's not just the carbon tax that the NDP and Liberals are hiking. The new tax hike that the government is announcing today will hit the middle class hard. In the middle of a housing crisis, they're raising taxes on carpenters and roofers. In fact, the Canadian Federation of Apartment Associations said this, quote, "The capital gains increase will discourage the construction of new rental homes for Canadians." Why is the government's response to the housing crisis punishing the people who actually build the homes?
Right.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am really glad to hear the Conservatives talk about housing because last week we made a very important announcement on housing. Last week we announced that amortizations for first-time home buyers and everyone buying new builds will be extended to 30 years. That is going to help young Canadians make the dream of home ownership a reality, and it will get more homes built faster. And I am shocked that the Conservatives are opposed to this essential measure.
The Honourable Member from Mégantic-L'Érable. After 9 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, whom the Bloc wants to keep alive this week, the number of students in Quebec are ever more using food banks. The student federations have said it. Students find it hard to feed themselves. Over 80,000 went to food banks, 4 times more than 10 years ago. Instead of continuing to starve our students, will the Prime Minister and his Bloc Québécois lieutenant allow Quebecers to vote immediately to cut taxes for a common-sense government? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. This is absolute nonsense, Mr. Speaker. The member says how difficult people are finding it to feed their children, how there's too many children who go to school on an empty stomach. Last week, his Conservative leader said that such ideas are bureaucratic. including in his own riding. It's bureaucratic to give children food so that they can't go to school on an empty stomach. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. I invite the Liberals to look at the situation in its face. The Bloc should flee because housing and food costs have doubled in the last few years. We're paying $1 billion in interest on our debt every week, all because of the $500 billion of inflationary spending that the Bloc supported. Everyone has been paying for this. Does the Prime Minister, supported by Le Bloc Québécois, understand that enough is enough and that we can no longer afford his incompetence? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Let us talk about incompetence. Incompetence is stopping children from being able to eat in the morning and stopping MPs from supporting kids who have to go to school with an empty stomach. There are food banks in his riding. Will he go there to explain to them why it's bureaucratic to stop children from eating their fill in the morning? The Honourable Member for La Prairie. The Liberals have a choice. They can correct an injustice to seniors by improving old age security for 65 to 74-year-olds. If they don't, well, they'll be solely responsible for causing an election. It's as simple as that. All retirees deserve support in the face of the rising cost of living. And this government is in no position to tell them they can't afford it. It has offered $83 billion in tax credits to oil companies, in addition to a lovely $34 billion pipeline. Now the Liberals have a choice. Seniors or elections? The Honourable Minister for Labour and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, this government has always chosen seniors. Unfortunately for our friends across the way, it's not always the case. Why have they voted against reducing the retirement age from 67 to 60, from 67 rather to 65? Why did they choose not to support the most needy Quebec seniors? At every turn, the Bloc Québécois voted against. What about dental care? The Bloc Québécois voted against dental care, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Just a reminder, oil companies received $83 billion in tax credits, and there was a bonus $34 billion pipeline. Meanwhile, pensioners aged 65 to 74 are being deprived of 10% of their pensions. That's a lot of generosity towards multi-billion-dollar oil companies out west, only to then tell Quebec seniors, well, I'm sorry, you're too expensive. Clearly, the oil companies are a Liberal priority. Our priority is seniors. It is high time the Liberals put their priorities in the right place. Are they going to improve pensions for all seniors or trigger an election? The Honourable Minister for Labour and Seniors. I would like to invite my colleague, and I know that he wants to be specific in his words. We have never cut aid to seniors. Everything we've done, despite their opposition, all we have done is increase support for Quebec seniors and Canadian seniors. The Bloc has systematically voted against. I'd like to ask my colleague to correct himself in his statements. We've never cut in senior budgets.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
$100 for a doctor's appointment. For-profit corporations like Loblaws are forced...
Colleagues, it's important for the person who has the floor to take the floor so that the Speaker can hear the question and making sure that they get a clear answer. The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
$100 for a doctor's appointment. For-profit corporations like Loblaws are forcing patients to pay to see a doctor. Now, the Conservatives love this because their chief strategist, Jenny Byrne, also doubles as a chief lobbyist for Loblaws. The Liberals promised a crackdown. That turned out to be a letdown. Why does a Liberal government continue to let big corporations rip off Canadians and stop defending and not defend our healthcare system?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the NDP had a choice. Continue working on pharmacare, continue working on dental, continue working to improve our health system, or to cave to a bully. And here's the facts, Mr. Speaker. If the NDP can't stand up to the Conservative leader, then how are they going to stand up for Canadians? The reality is we're going to keep fighting to improve our healthcare system and work on the basis of collaboration. We're not going to cave to the bullying of the Conservatives across the way, and we're going to make sure that every Canadian gets dental care, pharmacare, and yes, to make sure that we revolutionize primary care.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Again and again to big corporations that are ripping off Canadians, and they've not stood up to the Conservatives. Au Quebec.
In Quebec, the CSN says no profit on illness and sickness. We know that the Conservatives want to see CEOs enrich themselves upon the backs of the sick. But it's very disappointing to see this from the Liberals. They promised to stop the privatisation of healthcare. They have failed. Is it because they're too weak to stand up to the Conservatives, or too beholden to CEOs? The Honourable Minister for Health.
Week is, Mr. Speaker. Week is 2 days after the Conservative leader demands you stop action to work with the government to help Canadians on health care to run away. You know what else is weak? To abandon climate action when the Conservative leader puts too much pressure on you. And I think Canadians should ask if the NDP is willing to stand up for them if they can't stand up to the Conservative leader. I will say to you that we are here each and every day to make sure that Canadians get what they need, to stand up for our public health care system, and to make sure the Conservatives don't get what they want, which is to cut to the bone our health system.
The Honourable Member from Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time is up. Here's how bad the carbon tax has driven up inflation in food costs in Toronto. The Daily Bread Food Bank says their monthly usage has gone from 60,000 to 350,000 people per month. That's a 480% increase. Pre-COVID, they spent $1.5 million per year on food. Today, $29 million. Their only solution is to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. Instead, why don't we have a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide?
The Honourable Member for Families, Children and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity once again today to talk about what's up, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you what's up. Women's participation in the workforce is way up and has reached a record high. New childcare spots are being built, and that means 250,000 new spaces by 2026, Mr. Speaker. We know the Conservatives would like to cut these programs, but on this side of the House, we will fight for Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
The Liberals would make you think you've never had it so good, despite millions of Canadians having to line up at a food bank every month. And we just don't know how many more facts they need to see about how damaging the carbon tax really is. The trucking industry says it adds $4 billion a year. Farmers are going to pay $1 billion more in carbon taxes, and food banks in every part of this country are seeing skyrocketing use. And their own budget documents say it blows a hole of about $35 billion at least in the economy. Again, if they're so confident, call an election and let Canadians decide on the carbon tax for themselves.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Interest rates are down, inflation is down, gas prices are down, and pollution is down, Mr. Speaker. Pollution levels are at their lowest level in 25 years, Mr. Speaker. What we've achieved is the equivalent of removing from our roads 69 million cars less pollutions for Canadians, for our kids, all across the country. We're fighting for climate change. We're fighting for Canadians. We're fighting for a better future for all Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, everyone knows taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and pretty soon time's going to be up for these corrupt Liberals. We all remember a couple of weeks ago where a brave steelworker confronted the Prime Minister and said taxes are killing him, and he doesn't believe a single word the Prime Minister has to say. And yet, the NDP keeps propping up this unpopular government. Why? Because their leader wants to keep his pension. Why is this NDP Liberal government so intent on raising the carbon tax and reducing workers' pay?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, for all the Canadians watching at home, they will know what's up, Mr. Speaker. It's investment in the future of this country, Mr. Speaker. Right. Under this Liberal government, investment is up in decarbonization to make sure that our steel mill would be productive, to make sure that our steel workers would have a job, to make sure that Canada would win in the economy of the 21st century, Mr. Speaker. Canadians know that what's up is to make sure that this government continues, that we make sure that we invest in them, and we build the Canada of the 21st century.
The Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon.
That minister has some nerve to talk about steel. Let me tell you this. I met with steel workers in the steel industry, and they have said if they quadruple the carbon tax like they plan, there will not be a single steel plant left in this country. That's his economic record. That's what he's doing to Canadians. And the carbon tax is not an environmental plan. It's a tax plan that's blowing a $35 billion hole into the Canadian economy every year. Workers are bringing home less. They're paying more. It's time for a change. Why don't they call a carbon tax election and let Canadians decide?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to talk not only about steel but about aluminum, Mr. Speaker. Yes. Because one thing that Canadian workers know is that when it was time to stand up for them, we stood up for them, Mr. Speaker. We just imposed tariff on steel that is coming from China to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that we would protect our industry, we would protect our job, we would protect our future. Mr. Speaker, workers across the nation know that we have their back. We will fight for the industry, and we will always fight for Canada, Mr. Speaker.
Very good.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have weakened the criminal code, and now crime is moving out of Montreal and is becoming tentacular everywhere in Quebec. Let's not forget, the Bloc voted for the Liberal government's bill allowing criminals to be arrested and released twice in the same day sometimes. Can the Liberal government and its Bloc friends tell us why they made such a mistake? The Honourable Minister for Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Mr. Speaker, with regards to release on bail, what we did is that we changed the rules with the support of all parties in this House. We also increased penalties for certain crimes like car theft. But with regards to the provisions, this is a decision made by justices in our country who are appointed by provincial governments. Appeals decisions are made by provincial Crown prosecutors. The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, does the Minister recognise that changes through C5, C75, C83, does he recognise that criminals are no longer scared of anything? Crime is exploding throughout Quebec. A 14-year-old died in Beauce. Shots have been fired in Quebec City and in the Saguenay. An increase in crime. Will the government recognise their mistakes and bring back the criminal code to what it was? The Honourable Minister for Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Just to be absolutely clear, when a decision is made, it is made by a provincially appointed justice. An appeals decision is also made by an attorney appointed by a province. When a decision is made to see if there's enough place in prison to welcome someone, that is a decision made by provincial governments like the government of Quebec. In 3 words, speak to Legault. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, the Minister for Immigration admitted on Saturday that his government waited too long before reducing immigration levels. He said that they took a little too long to slow things down. Mr. Speaker, Quebec has been sounding the alarm for years. The Bloc Québécois has been warning the minister for years. We presented him with facts, and he responded with insults. Does he realise today that we would not be caught up in such a fiasco had he listened to Quebec's warnings instead of calling everyone all kinds of names? The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I nearly heard a compliment in my regard from my colleague, perhaps thinly veiled, but from here on in, I expect the Bloc to support our measures that will allow us to reduce immigration by temporary immigration by 7.5%. I hope that we will have his personal collaboration, because last time he contacted my office was to increase the number of temporary workers. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. I think that he's mixing a few conversations that were private. To quote the Minister again, it's always easy to look back and say, well, we should have done this or that. Mr. Speaker, what would have been easy is to listen when it was time to do so. I had somewhat of an issue hearing the question from the member for Lac-Saint-Jean, so I would ask him to start it again from the top. To quote the Minister again, it's always easy to look back and say we should have done this or that. Mr. Speaker, what would have been easy is to listen when it was time. Quebec warned him. The Bloc Québécois warned him. The economists of major banks warned him. Even his own officials warned his government as early as 2022 that his immigration targets would put pressure on healthcare and housing. He listened to no one and insulted everyone. Now it's too late to listen, but it's perhaps not too late to act. What is he waiting for, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. Mr. Speaker, so many compliments for me. I'm loving it. But I'd just like to remind the member across the way that it's the same Quebec government that tripled the number of temporary residences under their jurisdiction. We have the duty of readjusting. That is what we are doing, and we'll continue to do so. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, he just blamed his own government last week. It's all well and good if the minister admits that he took too long to act, but this admitted fault is not yet half forgiven, because at the moment there is no distribution of asylum seekers. A record number of asylum seekers are on social assistance because they're waiting months and months for their work permit from the federal government. They're not even allowed to work, Mr. Speaker. There's still years upon years upon years of delays in processing applications, and all the while, Quebec's public services are overworked. When are we going to see real action on the ground with real results, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. It just takes 60 days for a work permit, Mr. Speaker. I met the new Immigration Minister, Jean-François Roberge. I will be meeting him tomorrow with the Minister for Public Safety, and I expect we will make good progress.
The Honourable Member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, after 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, cost is up, crime is up, and time is up. Drug addiction and crime have been running rampant under this government. As a direct result of the failed drug policies, this legalization experiment, overdoses have become the leading cause of death for children in British Columbia. In fact, numerous First Nations in BC are under a state of emergency due to the drug crisis as they try to protect their children. When will the NDP Liberal coalition admit failure and bring home our loved ones drug-free?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, our hearts go out to every community that is impacted by the illegal toxic drug supply. And it's nice to hear the Conservatives actually acknowledge that there is a crisis, because when they were in power, they cut the drug treatment fund by more than 2/3, Mr. Speaker. They're not willing to invest. Actions speak louder than words. We need every level of government involved here to save lives. This side of the House, we've committed over $1 billion to date. We'll continue to do more. When are they going to get on board and work with us?
The honourable member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, the answer is clear to Canadians, and the NDP Liberal government failed hard drug experiment and save lives. Rather than stemming the tide of overdose deaths, this Prime Minister's radical experiment has flooded our communities with dangerous opioids. It's even worse in BC's First Nations communities, where people are dying at 6 times the national rate. When the NDP Liberal coalition and this failed agreement, when will they end it and end this failed policy and save lives?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we continue to work with every level of government to save lives each and every day. Rather than slogans on the back of a napkin, Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we listen to experts, we listen to the communities, we listen to the science. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we believe in the health of communities. On that side of the House, they don't believe in science, they don't believe in data, and they don't believe in saving the lives of Canadians.
The honourable member from King Vaughan.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. Mr. Speaker, across this country we are seeing seniors line up to get their groceries from food banks, skipping medication and living in tents. Mary, a senior in Maple, showed me her heating bill. She received $44 worth of gas but paid $46 in carbon tax. The NDP leader is keeping the Prime Minister in power so he can secure his pension. Why won't the NDP Liberal government call a carbon tax election and let Canadians decide?
The Honourable Minister for Labour and for Seniors.
Mr. Speaker, I thought we had heard everything in this House, and then I heard the honourable member. That from the party that has stood up in this House and voted no to every single support that we have brought in for seniors in this country. And that after the Prime Minister for that party, Mr. Harper, went to Davos, to the World Economic Forum, where he took that opportunity to tell Canadian seniors back home their retirement age was going up to 67. Shame on them, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from London Fanshawe.
Lebanese Canadians in my community and across Canada are frightened as the region experiences unprecedented explosions and airstrikes. They've been trying to rebuild Lebanon for years. They don't want a war. This escalation means civilians, including children, seniors, people living with disabilities, vulnerable people pay the price. My constituents are terrified for their friends and families who are caught in the middle. This government needs to be pushing for peace so all those in the region can be safe. Can this government tell us what exactly they're doing to de-escalate the situation and prevent a wider war?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada is following closely the situation between Israel and Lebanon, both because of the danger of escalation in the region, but also because the high number of Canadians in Lebanon. As we have said since October, Canadians should avoid all travel to Lebanon, and Canadians in Lebanon should book a commercial flight to leave the country. No country or nation stands to gain from any further escalation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Hamilton Centre.
This Liberal government is allowing the rampant wage theft of truck drivers. Drivers who bring essential goods to Canadians are being taken advantage of because neither Liberals nor the provincial Conservatives have the courage to crack down on shady bosses. Our hardworking truck drivers deserve a government that fights for them, one that ensures they get paid for their work. Mr. Speaker, when will this Liberal government finally enforce the Labour Code to protect vulnerable workers and stop the brazen wage theft?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and for Seniors.
Well, of course, Mr. Speaker, the NDP, had they stayed in on a cooperative basis with us, they would know that we have worked closely with both workers and businesses to find an effective and fair solution to this problem. In fact, earlier this year, we changed the Canada Labour Code to stop employers miscasting employees as independent contractors.
And any employer, Mr. Speaker, who knowingly misclassifies an employee to avoid their obligations is breaking the Canada Labour Code and will face consequences.
Good job.
The honourable member from Scarborough Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, 750,000 Canadians have already received care through the Canadian Dental Care Plan, and that number will keep rising. Almost 9,900 constituents in my riding of Scarborough Agincourt have enrolled in the program. Many seniors have been able to get dental care after years of not being able to afford to. Can the Minister of Health update this House on how the Canadian Dental Care Plan is helping Canadians access dental care?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for her question and for her relentless advocacy for oral health. The member for Scarborough Agincourt has been such a passionate advocate for making sure that everybody in this country gets access to the oral health care that they need. And you hear that number, 750,000 people in less than 5 months. That's an incredible number. But in behind that number, folks, are real lives, real stories of people who can be proud of their smile, people who are getting oral cancer. I was talking to Dr. Redmond, 3 patients identified with oral cancer that was caught early. Imagine what that means. This is about the kind of country that we live in, making sure that everybody gets care.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, the housing crisis isn't getting any better. In Quebec, right now, 1,671 families don't have housing. That's more than in July. There are 13% fewer housing starts. According to the APCHQ, many young people are worried about being able to afford the rent. 61% of young people. Can the government understand that making the same mistakes is not going to build more housing in Canada? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for my friend opposite, but he knows full well, where is the Conservative plan on housing, on people who are unhoused?
When it comes to getting people housed, when it comes to making sure there's more homes, what has this government done? Lifted GST off of the construction of apartments, taken people off the street, 87,000 people off the street with wraparound supports, Mr. Speaker. They go to encampments and make videos and use people as props. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to stand back.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for my friend opposite, especially dressed like we are today. But the question is that Canadians are suffering because of a shortage of housing. These folks have been in office for 9 years, and what they're doing isn't working. One thing's for sure on this side, our plan is not based on what the government opposite has done, all the while enthusiastically propped up by the Bloc. 28% of Canadians are thinking of leaving the country because of that. Have you thought about that? I'd just like to remind all members that questions are to be put to the chair in order to maintain a certain atmosphere in the House. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 housing units, affordable housing units. That's all the Conservative leader got built all across the country in the whole time his party was in office. And yet there are 160 affordable housing units that were built in the member opposite's riding in recent months. And so obviously it's the Conservative leader who's incompetent on this file. The honourable member for Chicoutimi-Lafiore. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of the Environment announced he would delay the imposition of his order, which is harmful to our region, and the Bloc saw this as a gain and was satisfied. But this order will ultimately be implemented and will kill 1,400 forestry jobs in our region. It's just a matter of time. The Conservatives, we're the only ones who would cancel that order once and for all. Is the minister willing to say that not one job will be lost as a result of his order? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All the Conservatives have to offer is slogans and catchy phrases. But what we made was an offer of $468 billion to show that we're always open to negotiating a deal with the Quebec government. But the Conservatives from Quebec, obviously, as usual, have nothing to offer anyone. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Leflore. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of this job-killing order, splitting the difference in two is not a gain. Lives are still being ruined. Handing out millions of dollars that won't go to the economic development of our regions is not a gain. The only possible gain for those affected in the forestry sector is for this government to fall before Christmas. I can't put the question to the bloc, but what does the minister have to say about a minimum of, to the 1,400 forestry workers minimum who will lose their jobs for sure? The Honourable Minister of Climate Change and the Environment. Mr. Speaker, whether it's combating climate change, where the Conservatives have nothing to say, or on the issue of air quality, water quality, the Conservatives are basically the only ones who don't get it. Workers, unions, companies, the regions, the experts all know that there's no future in the forestry industry if we don't protect the forests adequately. No one but the Conservatives questions that. We are there to work with all stakeholders and the government of Quebec to find a solution. The Conservatives can just keep talking to themselves. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Let's talk about the Liberals' former Quebec lieutenant who was on Tout le monde en parle recently. When he announced he was stepping down to run for the PLQ leadership, he was asked about Amira El-Gawabi, whose resignation was called for unanimously by the National Assembly. Unanimously. He said he would have voted the same as everyone else in the National Assembly, but that's funny. He didn't say anything about her when he was minister. How many Quebec Liberals want her to leave but don't have the courage to say so? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've worked for a long time in diversity, in the university circles in Quebec. I know how hard universities are working to hire people on the basis of merit, but as we know, all across Canada and all throughout Quebec, diversity is one of the strengths of our university, and that's why we will always work with the government of Quebec and those who are fighting discrimination and fighting for inclusion so that all institutions, all individuals, all universities make the right choices under the right circumstances. It's rare to hear heckling coming from that corner of the House. I hope this isn't a trend that's emerging. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, it's pretty incredible the kind of things coming from the new Quebec lieutenant, but I bet a lot of Quebec Liberals think like their former lieutenant for Quebec. But like him, before he stepped down, they're keeping quiet. They're not even embarrassed about stifling their opinions and putting aside their convictions when it suits their party and their personal ambitions for a cabinet job. If they truly share the values of Quebecers, then they should stand up, pound their fists on the table and say so. Why does Amira El-Gawabi still have a job? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quebec members on the government benches have a huge influence on the decisions that are made here. We are representative of Quebecers just as much as any Quebec member on the other side. The difference is that when we influence the government, we truly influence it. We don't just rip our shirts up publicly. We have an inside influence, and we're making a real difference.
The honourable member from Calgary-Mindapore.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Canadians are struggling to meet their basic needs, and this government has decided the only solution is to tax Canadians more. This new capital gains tax will add a 30% tax increase on food producers at a time when the cost of food has already skyrocketed. The last thing Canadian families need is increased financial stress because of tax on our food supply chains. Why is this NDP Liberal coalition imposing this job-killing tax hike on Canadians?
Great question. Why?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, let's be very clear about the facts. In an average given year, only 40,000 individual Canadians have capital gains above $250,000 a year. That's 0.13% of our population. And we believe that it makes sense for those with the broadest shoulders to support everyone else. Conservatives can tie themselves in knots trying to justify policies that are ultimately about austerity and cuts. That's no.
The honourable member from Calgary-Mindapore.
Well, they certainly gave their uber-rich friends enough time to move their money and are about to give their best friend, carbon tax Carney, $10 billion. Not only will this new capital gains tax increase financial stress, but it will prevent families from transferring wealth to the next generation. The Canadian dream is to build a foundation that you can pass on to your children. The capital gains tax is now increasing the pressures on Canadians as they pass on their wealth, their businesses, and their farms. Why does this NDP Liberal coalition want to kill the Canadian dream?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, what I want to know is why the Conservatives are so hypocritical and inconsistent. There was a Conservative who said in 2020, and I quote, "The wealthiest 1% who own the most expensive and luxurious real estate and have in their portfolios the most stocks and bonds and other financial instruments will continue to see their net worth expand, having done nothing, by the way, to deserve that expanded net worth." Who said that? The current Conservative.
The honourable member from Calgary, Nose Hill.
So interesting that the finance minister brought up hypocrisy. Last week it was revealed that Liberal pseudo-minister Mark Carney's company, Brookfield, is lobbying the government for billions for a new corporate climate fund. But recently, a damning report revealed that Brookfield doesn't account for a whopping 92% of its greenhouse gas emissions that investments create. That's hypocrisy, Mr. Speaker. Can the Environment Minister confirm that he and his NDP Liberal partners won't help wealthy unregistered lobbyist Mark Carney get rich by giving billions in subsidies to his greenwashed company?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government is happy to get advice from Canadians across the country. But let's talk about who the Conservatives get their advice from. They get advice on the cost of living from a Loblaws lobbyist. They get advice on foreign policy and on Ukraine from Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson. And they get advice on women's rights from misogynists and the far right. We will take no lessons from them.
That's right.
The honourable member for Saint-Léonard, Saint-Michel. Mr. Speaker, more than 9,000 of my constituents in Saint-Léonard, Saint-Michel are getting dental care thanks to the Canadian Dental Care Plan. This is a historic investment that benefits many Quebecers, especially seniors, and ensures access to the health care they need and deserve. Can the Minister of Public Services and Procurement explain how the Canadian Dental Care Plan helps Quebecers get the care they so desperately need? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. congratulations to the member for Saint-Léonard-Saint-Michel for the outstanding success of the Canadian Dental Care Plan in her riding. And that's true for the 750,000 Canadians who've had access to dental care in recent months. Unlike the member for Lévis-Bellechasse, Les Etchemins, she actually wins top prize. She's had 18,000 seniors in her riding seek out free dental care. No congratulations to the Conservative leader who still has nothing good to say about the Canadian Dental Care Plan.
Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up for this high-flying, jet-setting Prime Minister who's off to New York to...
I'm sorry. The honourable member has a voice that carries, but I'm still having difficulty hearing his voice. If I could ask members, please. If I could ask all members, please, to have either quiet conversations or so that we can the chair can hear the answer. The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Island, Rideau Lakes from the top, please.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up for this jet-setting, high-flying Prime Minister who's off to New York City to dine with elites while doubling costs for Canadians. While he's there, maybe he could check out the $9 million condo that he got for his media buddy, Tom Clark. They could share a coffee from this $5,000 coffee machine or work on their golf swing at the golf simulator paid for by Canadians, and maybe the Prime Minister can save us a couple of bucks and bunk with his buddy, Tom Clark, at this $9 million condo on Billionaires Row.
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister of Canada undertakes very important work representing Canada at home and abroad. And for example, this week in New York, he has spoken at the
The Honourable Minister, I'll invite him to start from the top, please.
The Conservatives might have been more comfortable, Mr. Speaker, if I began with a bad poem. However, the Prime Minister undertakes very important work on behalf of Canada at home and abroad. And for example, this week in New York, Mr. Speaker, not only is he speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, but he's also leading and co-hosting the Summit of the Future, talking about key global challenges on sustainable development, international peace and security, technical innovation, digital coordination, decarbonization and clean energy, and human rights. Now, I do appreciate nobody over there appears to care about any of those things, but they are important to Canadians.
Right. The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time is up. Since 2015, violent crime has surged by 50%. Shockingly, sex assaults by 74%. Today, the parole board inexcusably granted day parole to a serial rapist who still poses a risk to drug, manipulate, and coerce victims. Let that sink in. This is not keeping Canadians safe. Who on that Liberal bench approves of this?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague knows very well that the parole board by law operates independently from the government. Our responsibility is to ensure that the appropriate men and women serve on the parole board, something we have done with great seriousness. They know that the most important criteria in terms of an independent decision made by this quasi-judicial tribunal is public safety. My colleague knows that very well, and he should be careful not to increase public cynicism in a way that doesn't serve public safety. He knows very well that's incorrect.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, the United Nations is arguing that UNRWA employees who participated in the October 7th terrorist massacre are immune from legal action. This is a day which saw 7 Canadians murdered. Let me rephrase that. They're arguing that individuals who contributed to the rape, the murder, and the kidnapping are outside and above the law. So I have a simple question for this government. Do they support immunity for terrorists? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister for International Development.
Speaker, Canada is committed to ensuring that our humanitarian assistance aligns with Canadian values and international standards of neutrality. We take any allegations of misconduct very seriously. Upon learning of allegations from UNRWA about some of its staff, Canada was the first country to take action and pause all additional funding pending thorough investigations by the UN Office of Internal Oversight Services and an independent review led by former French Minister Catherine Colonna. But it is very rich, Mr. Speaker, for that member to talk about anything to do with the UN, because she would face down her party that wants to quit the UN. A founding member is in Canada.
The Honourable Member from West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Mr. Speaker, it's become abundantly clear that the Conservatives would cut the Canadian dental care plan, taking away coverage from 2.4 million Canadians who've already enrolled in the program, with more signing up every day. That's more than 282,000 British Columbians. Will the Minister of Citizen Services please update the House on the work being done by the government?
The Honourable Minister for Citizen Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my friend from British Columbia is correct. 2.4 million Canadians currently have their membership card. Over 750,000 Canadians have care. And we are all hearing the good stories of the change that is making an individual's life. It's making life more affordable. So while Canada is in a position to have the lowest deficit, the best economic forecasted growth, we're investing in making life more affordable with dental care, with child care, with pharmacare, by building more houses, by attacking climate change and making sure that we actually make measures to make Canada's lives better, and we'll continue to do that, Mr. Speaker.
Wow. The Honourable Member from Courtenay, Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, this summer the Fisheries Minister announced that she was closing both the Pachina and Carmana lighthouses. These lighthouses sit between the West Coast Trail, which sees thousands of hikers per year, and the Graveyard of the Pacific, a famously treacherous stretch of water. Automating these lighthouses simply won't suffice. This decision puts lives at risk and was made without consulting First Nations labour, mariners, or local communities. Will the Liberals pause this plan, do the proper consultation, and invest in keeping coastal people safe?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and Coast Guard.
Mr. Speaker, and to the member opposite for the question. We're aware of the cultural and historical significance of the lighthouses along the West Coast Trail. After an engineering investigation and assessment this year, the Canadian Coast Guard determined the locations were no longer suitable for the Canadian Coast Guard personnel to operate them safely. The safety and well-being of the Canadian Coast Guard personnel is our top priority, and we'll continue to ensure that the aids to navigation in these areas remain functional to continue to protect mariners and coastal communities.
The Honourable Member from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, 4 years ago to the day, this government promised a new Canada disability benefit modeled after the Guaranteed Income Supplement. The GIS supports millions with maximum amounts of over $1,000 a month. The CDB, it's slated to deliver a maximum of just $200, and that's the select few who can qualify for the disability tax credit.
Shame.
Consultations on regulation for the benefit close today. Will this government listen to the disability community and deliver a Canada disability benefit aligned with their promise 4 years ago?
Now.
The Honourable Minister for Diversity, Inclusion and Youth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are absolutely committed to making sure that we are delivering on the Canada Disability Benefit. Mr. Speaker, we are stepping up and making sure that more than 600,000 Canadians with disability will get the Canada Disability Benefit. Mr. Speaker, this is what happens when we all work together to deliver for Canadians, and we're absolutely committed to making sure we get it through the finish line. Thank you.
So comes to an end of question period. I understand that the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, is rising on a matter.
Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to fairness for every generation and to investing in Canadians. Therefore, pursuant to Standing Order 83-1, I would like to table in both official languages a Notice of Ways and Means motion, which contains our plan to make our tax system and our economy fairer for everyone. Pursuant to Standing Order 83-2, I would ask that an order of the day be designated for consideration of this Ways and Means motion. Thank you.
I recognise the Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just 1 second. I would just like to invite members in the House to leave the chamber in a quiet and orderly way for an important point of order from the Honourable Member from Salaberry-sur-Roi. The Honourable Member, you have the floor. Mr. Speaker, I think that you will find that there is unanimous consent for the following motion. That the House reiterate that elected officials are invested with the trust of the people and have a responsibility to the office they hold. That the House reaffirm that violence and threats have no place in Parliament. That the House urge all its members to behave in a civil and respectful manner towards their colleagues in order to allow for truly constructive debate in the interests of democracy and the common good. All those opposed to what the Honourable Member has moved will please say nay. The House has heard the terms of the motion. All those against the motion will please say nay. Carried.
Hamilton sent on this point of order, just following the ruling which I need to make before the House, a ruling that has been a long time wanted for, and then I'll proceed directly to the member right afterwards. I am now ready to rule on the question of privilege raised on June 18, 2024 by the member for Vancouver East concerning foreign interference and alleged reputational harm to members of Parliament as a result of the publication of a report by the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, also known as NSCOP. The report, tabled in the House on June 3, 2024, discussed the threat of foreign interference in Canada's democratic processes and institutions. In her intervention, the member quoted several extracts of the report supporting the idea that members of Parliament might have, wittingly or semi-wittingly, assisted foreign state actors in undermining Canada's democratic processes and institutions. The fact that the report failed to disclose these members' identity raised questions and cast a pall over the entire House. As evidence to this, the member reported that on the street in front of Parliament, individuals were, and I quote, shouting, questioning, and jeering at members of Parliament about who the traitors might be, unquote.
She added that the unsubstantiated suspicions were damaging to members' reputations individually and to the House collectively. She concluded by arguing that the suspicions diminished members and the House's effectiveness and impeded their ability to carry out their parliamentary duties. According to a long-standing practice, certain conditions must be met for the Speaker to find a prima facie question of privilege. House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, page 142, states as follows, quote, "The Speaker must be convinced that a prima facie case of breach of privilege has been made, and second, the matter must be raised at the earliest opportunity. If the Speaker feels that these two conditions have been met, the Speaker informs the House that, in his or her opinion, the matter is entitled to take precedence over the notices of motion and orders of the day standing on the order paper," unquote.
My predecessors have on occasion rejected questions of privilege on the sole basis that they were not raised in a timely manner. As members can discern, the inherent logic behind this rule is straightforward. It presupposes that if a question of privilege is so important as to require to take precedence over all other matters of the House, the member raising it presumably would have taken their first opportunity to bring it to the attention of the Speaker. Le 29 mai 2008,
on the 29th of May 2008, Speaker Milliken, on page 6277 of the debates, indicated that, quote, "It is true that members wishing to raise a question of privilege must do so at the earliest opportunity. However, there is an important nuance. In this case, as in others, it is not so much that the event or issue complained of took place at a given time, but rather that the members bringing the matter to the attention of the House did so as soon as practicable after they became aware of the situation. The Chair has always exercised discretion on this point, given the need to balance the need for timeliness with the important responsibility members have of marshalling facts and arguments before raising matters of such import in the House." Unquote.
I note that at least 2 sitting weeks passed between the release of the NCCOP report and the moment that this matter was raised with the Chair. The facts raised by the member in her arguments had become apparent well before her intervention. The Chair is of the view that the member for Vancouver East had prior opportunities to raise her concerns. As such, this question of privilege fails to meet one of the 2 conditions to find a prima facie question of privilege. Nevertheless, the Speaker would like to address the substantive element of this member's concern. The member argued that because the NCCOP report claimed that one or more members were working for a foreign entity but failed to name them, it raised suspicions about all 338 members, which impeded us all in our effectiveness in carrying out our parliamentary duties. I understand the point the member is trying to make.
To find a prima facie question of privilege on substantive grounds, members must be able to demonstrate how an individual member or the House collectively has been interfered with in carrying out their functions. House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, at page 148, states, quote, "In deliberating upon a question of privilege, the Chair will take into account the extent to which the matter complained of infringed upon any member's ability to perform his or her parliamentary functions." Unquote.
While a member should always take care to make this link when raising a question of privilege, it is not enough to assert it in some general way. The member must demonstrate concretely how they or the House were impeded in the discharge of their functions, and most important, that evidence exists as to the material interference. While I understand that findings presented in the NCCOP report are serious and appear to create suspicions about certain members, that in itself is not a basis to establish this question of privilege, that this question of privilege merits priority of consideration over all other House business. Furthermore, the Chair notes that the NCCOP report was made public in the interest of not only public disclosure, but also to assist members of Parliament in their understanding of the threat foreign political interference poses to our democratic institutions. For these reasons, I cannot conclude that either the necessary conditions have been met to establish a prima facie question of privilege on the matter raised by the member. I thank all members for their attention. And now, the honourable member from Hamilton Centre is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on a point of order regarding the ongoing failure and refusal of a witness to provide documents requested by the Standing Committee of the Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. The committee, under Standing Order 122, has the authority to summons witnesses and compel the production of documents, rights that are essential to the functioning of Parliament as outlined in the Constitution Act of 1867. These powers are fundamental to our ability to conduct inquiries and obtain the truth, as noted in the House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, page 137. The witness in question, Stephen Anderson, a business partner of the Minister of Employment, was ordered by the committee on June 11th to produce phone records, text messages, and call logs from September 8th, 2022. but he failed to comply. And despite his appearance on July 17th